It's a real honor and pleasure to be able to introduce Dr. Forrest Crawford as our last lecture speaker for this year. Dr. Crawford has been employed here at Weber State University for 35 years. He's distinguished himself in a number of arenas. He's noted for his abilities to network with a diverse range of constituents, to achieve multiple goals, to facilitate understanding and promote progressive change. I'm not expecting that Forrest is going to leave campus after his last lecture here today, but if he did, he would leave a lasting legacy both here at Weber State University and in the northern Utah area, the state, the region, and even throughout the world. He's done a lot of wonderful things. Forrest has co-founded a number of organizations that have made an impact. He's co-founded several non-governmental organizations like Utah Delta Sigma Theta Incorporated, a professional society for black women, the Mahatma Gandhi Alliance for Peace and Coalition for the Advancement of Minorities in Higher Education. Dr. Crawford helped to establish the state Martin Luther King Jr. Human Rights Commission. That's a group that's been responsible for adding the honorary name Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard on 600 South in Salt Lake City, and the Utah Coalition for La Raza that named 500 South the Cesar Chavez Boulevard. Crawford's insights and talents have given him an opportunity to serve on committees, boards, and commissions, academic and non-academic. He's chaired the Utah Disability Law Center, chair of the Northern Utah HIV/AIDS Coalition, chair of Children's Heaven, an orphanage for teen girls in Addis Ababa. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but there we go. Ethiopia, and vice chair of the Utah Humanities Council. He was education chair for the Utah Academy of Science, Arts, and Letters, treasurer for the Alliance of Black School Educators, and currently serves as President Milner's assistant to the President for Diversity. And I think he served on the selection committee that selected our new president, Charles A. White. So, if we're unhappy with him. But really, for me, knowing Forrest is knowing how he's touched the lives of so many students over time, and faculty as well, as he has worked to provide a view of equality and tolerance that has just been outstanding and has just helped many of us see a different way to go about the business that we go about in education. He has mentored so many students over the years here and touched their lives in so many ways. The late Coretta Scott King, wife of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., once said this about Forrest: "Your commitment to educate, train, and encourage your students using Kingian," I guess that's a new name, principles of nonviolent social change, as well as your role as the co-founder and chair of the Martin Luther King Jr. Human Rights Commission for Utah, has touched the lives of many. You have been instrumental in promoting the legacy of Dr. King through your speeches, essays, and editorials. And I would also say through his actions in the kinds of things that he's promoted and got going and supported and helped many of us to understand the value of some of those things. Forrest has been relentless in lobbying for the improvement of education and human rights in Utah. Most notable was his Utah Hates Crimes lobby that resulted in strengthening our laws against hate-motivated violence. He has received accolades and honors too many to mention. Recently, he was re-elected by his peers to a second term as the presiding Secretary General to the International Society for Teacher Education this past May in meetings held in Faro, Bhutan. He is published in state, national, and international sources and presented papers in countries like Israel, Kuwait, South Africa, Taiwan, and Spain. So which brings me to a story. He's the only faculty member that I know here at Weber State University that has an endowed chair in the O'Hare airport in Chicago. So the story goes kind of like this. He was trying to get to a country, and I can't remember the name of the country, but to get there he had to go to Chicago and then France and then to this country. Well, he got to Chicago, he got to France, and he didn't have the right papers. So he went back to Chicago and spent the night there. Thought he had everything in order, went back to France, didn't have the right papers, went back. In the end, he spent 3 full nights, right, at the Chicago airport. Hence, he has an endowed chair there. And he was the inspiration for the movie that you all know. And Chicago, there's something about him in Chicago. So I've known Forrest for a long time and had a lot of fun with him and respect him a lot. We've traveled together, we've roomed together, we've presented together. And one time we were going to present in Chicago, and we flew out together on the same flight, and we got to, I'm not sure if I recall, I think it was Denver. For some reason we stopped in Denver, and the plane got held up. And we were concerned that we were not going to get to Chicago in time for our presentation, and eventually there was some slots that opened up in another plane to get to Chicago, so we made the decision that he would go, and I would stay, because all of our materials and everything were already on the plane that was being delayed, so I would stay, keep track of that stuff and get there. Well, when I got to Chicago, I left all my suitcases right at the counter and headed up to the class where we were supposed to present, and of course his luggage and our materials for the presentation, I had them all. When I walked in, the presentation was already underway. Forrest was in blue jeans, t-shirt, and stocking feet. And looking just right at home. But he was happy to see me. So, just a couple more quick things about Forrest is he's a great cook. And if you want to know about barbecuing or smoking meats or making any kind of barbecue sauces, he's a genuine article there. And also he's terrific when it comes to his sense of humor and his telling jokes. And I remember a trip that about 12 of us at Teacher Ed went on way back years and years ago to Jackson Hole, Wyoming. We were all in a big bus, and he kept us entertained most of the way. So if you want to know why the frog should get a loan, talk to Forrest. Finally, again, he's very deserving of this honor. Just earlier this month, Forrest was selected by the Utah Education Association Board of Directors to receive the Charles E. Bennett Human and Civil Rights Award for 2012. So please welcome Forrest Crawford, your speaker.
Well, good afternoon. Good to see everyone. I really do appreciate you giving me the opportunity to share a few thoughts with you over the time that we have. And I will try my best to kind of get through this so you can proceed on with the fullness of the day that you have. I appreciate, first of all, the Teaching and Learning Forum for really giving me the opportunity to share some of my interests, passions, and perspectives, and how all of those things kind of inform who I am and what I do. But I also want to take the opportunity to thank students who have also helped in the formation of who I am as an individual. You already know that part of my student days have been here at Weber in the early 70s, and so I value those student athlete days, but also individuals in the community. And last night we had a wonderful reception and banquet, and we had a lot of fun and a lot of interesting conversation. And so I want to thank Weber State community, the community at large, for pausing for that brief minute just to give me an opportunity to really slow down and reflect on some of the things that I've done roughly over the 40 years that I've been here in Utah. You know, sometimes, you know, you just kind of hit the ground running and you don't think about time and you don't think about some of these other things until all of a sudden you are forced into a situation to reflect on who you are and to sort of give an account. And I guess this is kind of the real purpose of last lecture. And I've been spending half of my time trying to explain to people about last lecture. I've got to come up with a better narrative about last lecture because I've already given my speech. I've told you this is not my last lecture. This is the title of our series, our program here. And you asked me, are you quitting? Are you dying? Are you people giving cards and flowers. But I just wanted to take a few minutes to share a few thoughts, but I also want to acknowledge before I start here from our Utah System of Higher Education State Board of Regents, Regent and Pastor Reverend Francis A. Davis. Acknowledge yourself there, Reverend Davis. I want to thank the Teaching and Learning Forum Committee for organizing this wonderful event. But finally, I extend a sincere debt of gratitude to Weber State for giving me the opportunity to learn, grow, and make a contribution. But I just want to really simply say thank you without having to grapple with words to come up with, but to simply say thanks. From the days that I arrived here 40 years ago this past August as a wide-eyed, hopeful student athlete on a Tulsa, Oklahoma, from a Tulsa, Oklahoma Greyhound bus to play football for Weber, little did I know that I would set out on a pilgrimage that in its seemingly full circular path have me standing here before my peers to grapple with the question, what do you know, what have you been doing, what have you been up to, what are the makings of the lived experiences that you've gone through, to kind of put this in some kind of a capsized form that I can remember. Mildred Neal, one of my early mentors, she always asked me when I would stop by her office as a student, she says, what is your legacy going to be? You need to think about these things. I'm going to legacy? Okay, tell me how to spell that. I was going by to say hello. I saw some color. I would go by and say hello. Trying to navigate my way through the campus. But my immediate response to all of this is when I started here, actually my hair was black. In fact, it was jet black, and now it's visibly another color. It's not just attributed to age only. Actually, I brought a little something that I think that has really kind of helped me along as my hair has gone gray. And this is what I call my genuine Martin Luther King Jr. church fan. A lot of times when I'm experiencing a lot of stress and strain and etc., all I usually do is get out this fan and just start fanning a little bit. Sometimes I have students come to my office and they drive me up the wall. And really, try it out. It works, right? Yeah, it works. Well, this fan has really saved me over the years because it's given me an opportunity to really reflect on what I'm doing, think about some of the things that I care about in this community. But you in all seriousness should know that this is really a difficult question to answer, for I do not have the full and complete answer. That I do not stand before you to anxiously to spew some immutable dogma. What I do know is that this school, this community has exposed me to a treasure chest of some of the most dynamic, knowledgeable, and talented individuals that I've had the opportunity to meet and benefit from over the years. And I did not come to you, though, as an empty vessel. In fact, that it just lost in seeking, that I actually came from a very loving, education-minded, spirit-filled activist family in Oklahoma who cared about respecting and lifting others from the margins. I was sitting here by my mother, Hazel Crawford, to be more and to do better, not to replicate the segregating, desolated, abject poverty conditions I escaped. That was a searing reality of my childhood. But to seek out and align myself with role models, mentors, advisors, friends, and wise elders, that would take me from what I was to make me more than what I thought I could ever be. That's why. That's where this place really comes into clear focus, because the Weber State community has been very good to me. But I also must say that I've been very good to Weber State community. I have been influenced and shaped by some of the most passionate community leaders, caring citizens from all walks, and notable scholars of humanitarians that deeply care about this state and about this community. I am honored to know by your presence and and that you have helped mold this unvarnished soul and smooth some of the rough edges toward who I am today. That as I reflect on my boyhood in Oklahoma, that I remember Jim Thorpe, who was always and have been and always will be one of my most wonderful heroes, that he was actually one of my first focus of the person that I really wanted to try to be, because I was trying to develop as an athlete. But I always enjoyed the Jim Thorpe story, who was a native of Oklahoma and American Indian ancestry. But also, as I made my way here, that I feel like that there were people who were really very powerful and very influential early on in my life. And I just wanted to share briefly with you some of those individuals. And I think most of you that's been around here know some of these other individuals that have passed on. That we have Mildred Neal there, Kay Evans, Keith Harrison, Dan Eagles, and Haley Oliver. These are some of the individuals who have passed on, but have made significant strides and significant contributions to my own personal life. But I also think those more contemporaneous that I've had an opportunity to meet here at the university, people like Tony Spanos, who actually helped train me for my first marathon, and it wasn't a pretty picture. It was not a pretty picture. People like Catherine McKay, and I've been involved with her with Weber Reeds and some of the faculty over in arts and humanities, as they develop the venture course, or sometimes we refer to it as the Clementi course, that I'll say a little bit about in a few seconds here. But people from the Services for Multicultural Students, and Dr. Sadler, and I just recently went with Dr. Sadler this past summer on the Civil War battlefield tour back in the D.C. area. It was one of the most profound and wonderful experiences. And Bill Clapp, that all of you know, who's retired, but he and I used to go over to his office, and we just used to argue all of the time. And he was contrastingly and philosophically different from our experience, was so different from each other. But it was just wonderful to have this exchange with somebody who was far, far different than I on the scale. And the short of it is that it resulted in he and I getting together and actually co-presenting a paper at the National Association for Multicultural Educators a few years back before he retired. I've also been involved with community organizations like the Disability Law Center, the King Commission, the Utah Humanities Council, the Gandhi Alliance, just to name a few, and the Inclusion Center. These organizations have really been a part of my individual formation as I found my way and navigated through the community. Justice Brandeis once quoted that the most important role that you can serve in society is the role as a citizen. And And I would have never experienced these and thousands of other opportunities had I taken counsel of my first days arriving here at Weber State, when actually I had a couple of my colleagues that actually came up the very first day of my first couple of hours at work. In fact, I was running up the stairs in the Union Building to go, we used to do registration over in the ballroom there. They met me at the top of the stairs and they said, "We want you to know that you was crammed down the throat of this institution." Now, this was my first couple of hours on campus, so that really set the stage for what I felt like that I had to be faced with. And so, but I ignored this for the most part because we stand on the brink, 125 years of this great institution, that I like the Gwendolyn Brooks quote where she says that we are each other's business, that we are each other's harvest, that we are each other's magnitude and bond. That this notion to me is intimately tied to a German concept of Bildung. And Bildung, as you look at the slide here, focuses on this issue of educating and lifelong learning. That Bildung is an important concept to me because what it focuses on is not only individual self-determination, but solidarity with society, but also the African notion of Mutu, where it says that I am because you are because I am. These two concepts really frame how I view my professional experience here at Weber State University. And so if we are to embrace to some degree the notion that it takes a village, that we must also ask ourselves, who are the villagers? What is the nature and the character of its inhabitants? And what kind of humanity are we producing? And so I've grappled with this and had many conversations in the community about this notion. But I believe that what's underneath all of this is the human spirit. That the human spirit compels you to acknowledge, or in some cases reject, the essence of one's existence as a human species. The human spirit allows, for example, the Olympians to achieve against the odds beyond their raw talent or abilities, to break the bonds of slavery, and also to break the bonds of slavery as a result of humankind's inhumanity to each other. A good friend of mine who is the chief of the Dakota Nation, Orville Lookinghorse, he's also the 19th generation keeper of the white buffalo calf pipe. When we have our conversation, he always talks about the importance of being one with nature and being in rhythm with nature. And I treasure the conversations I always have with him. He has spoke at this university before. He's been involved in our community here. That in effect, when our teaching, in fact, our noble profession elevates the human spirit, we equip our students with the gift of consciousness and discernment to deploy humanity in the manner that we have modeled in our classrooms, in our labs, in our offices during advisement sessions, and in our field-based academic excursions. Sidney Harris once wrote that the purpose of education is to turn mirrors into windows. Achieving human diversity then at Weber State or anywhere else for that matter is not an easy enterprise, and I think that most, if not all of you that are involved in this enterprise on a daily basis know that to be true. I always tell people that I was doing diversity when diversity wasn't cool. That I don't say this as a boast, but the novelty of diversity wears pretty thin if we continue to define it by how many and who's represented. While this is an important step, it is far more than bean counting, as they informally say, or far more than the rhetorical aspirations of full inclusion as a way to frame our intent, but falls short of the higher goal of dispositional challenge of how we behave. And I'm not whining though, and don't get me wrong, because I value my time and commitment to sharing with the classrooms and community, but I shouldn't have to be picked among from the chosen few. I always speak up for diversity or its absence thereof. That is an affront, as far as I'm concerned, to that, to me or anyone else that allows us to continue constructing and harboring the unconscionable truths about our interpersonal, organizational, and cultural ineptness normatively practiced in everyday actions. Yes, we ought to have visible representation, but the problem stems from us using this mode of diversity in the absence of a core value shift that gives one an excuse for not needing to speak up or to do more in meaningful ways. For me personally, some of my fellow activists have always heard me say that it's less about affirmative action and more about acting in the affirmative. That Vince Harding, one of the great historians, notable historians, was challenged to explain in a lecture about our sister Harriet Tubman and her resolve to stage the escape of slaves through the Underground Railroad, and how relatively few actually escaped. And I'm phrasing Harding when he says, but he went on to answer that Harriet Tubman was not concerned with how many slaves she saved or how smooth or efficient the operation. She was focused on the profound need to act on a compelling interest of humanity larger than herself. And how many of us in this room are engaged in transforming human conditions larger than ourselves, or are we just flying comfortably below the radar so as to not be fully exposed, vicariously reaping the benefits of sacrifices made by others that can get you fired or kicked to the curb? I tell my classes all of the time that the road to equality has always been and always will be tired, worn, crooked, and even messy, and a messy enterprise. No straight path to justice ever was, but you nevertheless must tread forward. Racism in our society, and all of the isms, if you will, it's a very treacherous thing, and I think that most, if not all of us, have probably experienced it to some degree. In fact, I was telling some people the other day that I think that some of you, particularly some of you that are familiar in the psychology arena, are familiar with the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Behavior Disorders. And I've always advocated for, and I know that there are various narratives in it, but I've always advocated for the fact that I believe that racism ought to be in the DSM, what is it, 4 or 5, or whatever we have there. But racism ought to be in there as a dysfunctional behavior that's diagnosable and treatable. To me, that's why we have these variations of progress and regress, this tension, if you will, towards societal parity. Why? Because we are selective about what battles to pick. One unjust dilemma is more palatable to take up arms than another. And my contention is that we must stop picking and choosing. Stop picking and choosing the battles. That's why we don't make the progress that we make, because we always pick the easy stuff. I mean, anybody can pick the easy stuff. Pick the hard battles. Frederick Douglass, our brother Frederick Douglass, has already counseled us when he says that if progress is to take place, there has to be a struggle. Whether it's physical or whether it's spiritual, whatever, that progress has to, that there has to be a struggle. That he goes on to say that power concedes nothing without a demand, that it never has, and that it never will. I feel privileged to have worked with a group of individuals. I think there's a few of them that's here today on our state hate crimes legislation. It was kind of a team of us, a core of us, who had worked on this legislation that was really originally started by Representative Frank Petronelli, I don't know, maybe 15 years or so ago. The short version of that is that it met with very minimal success. In fact, they watered it down significantly. It sat dormant for a while, and then Representative Pete Suazo, or Senator Pete Suazo, picked it up and several of us got together and we advanced that. And as Pete Swazo passed away, then Representative Litvak picked up that armor, and we carried forward. And so this whole hate crimes initiative took literally about 8 or 9 years or so, maybe from longer, to get at least some reasonable level of teeth in the legislation for the purposes of prosecuting those individuals who commit crimes against individuals and groups. That we have a serious problem with that in our Utah communities, where these hate-motivated violent crimes are oftentimes referenced, and particularly more so now in the gay community than any other community. But we also know that statistically African Americans tend to be the most targeted, directly targeted individuals for hate-motivated violence. What then is the culminating basis for my lamentable assertion that informs and motivates what I do? That's why I stand before you this day and advance this title, for I believe that if humanity is to thrive, even survive, then we must be more deliberate, even pointed about the epistemological aims of higher learning. I mean, that's why we call it higher learning, that we need to learn more and be more and do more. And maybe we should take counsel from our friends in Bhutan. There were several of us from Weber State went to Bhutan a few months back, the jewel of the Himalayas, who always maintain that we need to educate for gross national happiness. And they don't necessarily mean going around and just being all lollygag and everybody having a good time and eating and sleeping and drinking and whatever. Gross national happiness to the Bhutanese culture and society is really making sure that you are educating the whole person. The literature advances this argument under the auspices of we sometimes in our literature refer to it as expert novice teaching. As master teachers, for example, you know that you exhibit unique qualities that make learning content more alive and relevant. And several educational scholars remind us that the pedagogical content knowledge involves the blending of subject content knowledge and pedagogy into an understanding of how particular issues are organized, represented, and adopted to the diverse interests and abilities of learners and are presented for instruction. That's part of what we do over in the Department of Teacher Education. That successful teachers exhibit enthusiasm and demonstrate respect, and I call it, of course, in this context, reverence for their students, as well as a comprehensive knowledge of development, student diversity, and intercultural competency. What my view is that when teaching for humanity, that you go far beyond the satisfaction of knowing that you forged through critical content in a book by the end of a term. And it's more about taking the time to connect these scientific formulas and important medical practitioner interventions and historical events or subject matter principalities to how the human condition can be transformed and fundamentally elevated or diminished, if you will, as a result of your actions. That teaching for content is relevant but should not overshadow the necessary skills derived by meaningful and authentic engagement of learners that are more likely to apply this. I had a good friend of mine, Earl Shores, who died fairly recent, who is the national founder of the Clemente course for the humanities. We've invited him to Utah, and the Utah Humanities Council had an opportunity to as well as Weber State had an opportunity to host Earl Shores here shortly before he died. But one of the things that Earl used to always say, and by the way, Weber State, we actually have a version, I think we still have the venture course, is that right? We still have venture at Weber State. So the venture course is kind of a derivative of the more popularly known Clemente program for the humanities. This is a program that give students, usually who are underserved or even families, opportunities to learn innovative and practical ways to understand the arts, poetry, logic, history, music, ethics, and so forth and so on, and how they apply to everyday life, guided by rigorous faculty members who facilitate those courses. Earl said before he died that the humanities are a foundation for getting along with the world, for thinking, for learning to reflect on the world instead of just reacting to whatever forces that is turned against you. And what Earl and others believe in, and the Utah Humanities Council, our state Humanities Council believe in, is that we want people to actively engage in society. We want people to be validated, but also to understand that you have a vested interest in your self-formation as part of your community. And in short, then, if this action takes place in a classroom, then I believe that reverence then must be the centerpiece of our pedagogy. How are we on time, by the way? We okay? These are my, I hate to talk about them, but they've threatened me within a few inches of my life if I don't stay on task. They sat with me, by the way, these two have really been wonderful, helping me to organize various aspects of our day-to-day. Reverence in this context is defined as extending respect, honor, courteous deference, regard, or profound empathic love and appreciation because of one's place. And in this context, what I'm really referring to is the student and the teaching relationship, that in a sense what we're talking about as far as reverence is the transmission of the sense of dignity. Now I wanted to just talk a couple minutes because I know I'm kind of moving more toward the end of my time, but I just wanted to talk a few minutes about this notion of reverence within the context of our subject matter of the day. But I wanted to raise a question very quickly about the teacher, and most if not all of us have heard the phrase, the teachable moment. And we have varying kinds of images of what we mean by the teachable moment. And I think the least of what we are talking about here is the teachable moment is at least transformative in nature. In other words, that teachable moment compels you to move from one situation, one place, to another in a very direct and deliberate manner. That the teachable moment or experiences and knowledges is enlightened enough that compels you not only to think deeper, but to act more decisive, in other words, to do something different. And so part of what the teachable moment is about is reflecting deeply on about your situation. And I tell students about the Black Scholars United, I tell them this all the time. I say, don't just think about the moment. Think deeply about what your situation is. And more importantly, don't think about it. Do something different about it. Don't just, we can't stand around just thinking all of the time. Let's do something about it. And then the third part of that is that you empathically share with others to influence community and society toward the greater good. In other words, as you reflect and as you act, that you extend that to the community for the greater good. And it may well be the supreme. It may well be the supreme virtue of the multicultural classroom. And in many ways, reverence is more powerful than tolerance. And I was really deliberate about this because when you think about reverence and when you think about tolerance, tolerance is just kind of, just getting along, sort of go along to get along. But reverence really requires more of a deeper connection to the person that you're having to engage. So what you've got to do is to be very respectful of that person, that you've got to know that person, you've got to know the nature and to care about who that person is. And the more we know about that individual, and for that matter, the more we know about the situation, the better we are informed in terms of how we act on the condition of that individual. The Iroquois nation back in 1744 had sent a group of American Indians from that tribe to gain an education. They went to the college, came back, and that it compelled the chief of the tribe to send a letter to William and Mary College about the impact that this education has had on the individuals that William and Mary had sort of, if you will, recruited to attend the school. He says in this note, and I'll read it very quickly because I know my time is short here, but he says that we know you highly esteem the kind of learning and taught in these colleges, and the maintenance of our young men while with you would be very expensive to you. We are convinced, therefore, that you mean to do us good by your proposal. And we thank you heartily, but you who are so wise must know that the different nations have different concepts of things. And you will not, therefore, take it amiss if our ideals of this kind of education happens not to be the same as yours. That we have the same experience of it. Several of our young people were formerly brought up in colleges of the Northern Province. They were instructed in all your sciences, but when they came back to us, they were bad runners. Ignorant of every means of living in the woods, unable to bear either cold or hunger, knew neither how to build a cabin, take a deer, or kill an enemy, or spoke our languages imperfectly, were therefore neither fit for hunters or warriors, nor counselors. They were totally good for nothing. And we are, however, not the less obliged for your kind offering. Though we declined accepting it, because they were extended an invitation to bring some of the natives of the tribe to be educated at William and Mary, he says, though we are obliged to decline to accept it and to show our gratitude, gratefulness and sense of it, if the gentlemen of Virginia shall send us a dozen of their sons, we will take great care of their education, instruct them in all we know, and make men of them. Yeah. It's an interesting way to see that. And that's why, as I read this narrative and left moved toward the end, because I'm going to skip over several other attributes of this, because I know that I'm running out of time here. But I think that that's why it's important that reverence, in my perception, needs to be a critical dimension in the development and the education of our students here at Weber State. That I want to, if you don't mind, turn to that slide that talks about the underpinning of reverence as pedagogy. That I actually have outlined 5 what I refer to as underpinnings of the reverence pedagogy. Number 1 is the teaching for democracy. That part of what we have to do is to teach people how to be civil and how to be personally responsible for their actions. And I think that you see here the Du Bois quote where he says, of all the civil rights with the world, which the world has struggled and fought for over 5,000 years, that the right to learn is undoubtedly the most fundamental. And so I think that it's important as part of this underpinning to incorporate reverence when we're teaching for democratic society. Teaching for global citizenship that connects us to the world around us, that you hear it all at the time, and you already know that we are no longer the island that we were in 19th and early 20th century. That our society has significantly transformed itself, where our tentacles intimately are interwoven all over the world, literally. That teaching for diversity and multiculturalism and valuing the human differences, that if you look at the provisions in the Universal Declarations and UNESCO, some of the provisions that came out of the deliberations of the Nobel Prize laureate summit, that you will come to know that this whole ideal of the importance of global literacy is very important and very profound to our society. That the president of the Latter-day Saint Church, President Monson, said that the world in which we live is filled with diversity. We can and should demonstrate respect toward those who believe different from ourselves. When we talk about the notion of teaching for meaningful engagement, the importance of being able to collaborate and problem solve, that is more important. And I've already spoke with you about the notion of the relationship between tolerance and reverence. And then finally, teaching for humanity, that this notion of epistemological transformation really is tied up in the three notions that I listed here as knowing, caring, and acting. In knowing, caring, and acting, what I'm really saying that we know a lot of people that have a lot of knowledge, but guess what? They don't care. And we have a lot of people that have a lot of knowledge and even they might care, but guess what? They don't do anything. The knowing, caring, and acting, it has to come together as part of transforming a reverent and humane society. That's why I have the quote here that what is important, ask the mind. And I think that you can understand the gist of what that is projecting. That when I teach for humanity, I'm not trying to produce some world peace diplomat. What I'm really just trying to do is to train and engage our novice learners how to practice good teaching, that as a consequence make good, competent citizen learners. Among these are creations of a proper learning environment in the classroom that they organize. In the final analysis, reverence requires more than just a superficial tinkering with curriculum or explaining some cute novel way to explain how you get along with others. That it requires doing the work of humanity. That reverence is not a passive enterprise. That not playing it safe and flying silently below the radar just won't cut it in our society. That if you've been granted a talent and you make the gift known, and yes, you make that gift known, and yes, it's subject to critique. But so what? That somebody will definitely call you on your goal and your ability to try to transform society. You'll get called out on that, but so what? You have to account, but you have to stand up for something, and I think that you have to understand that we are all a part of humanity. But I thought, as I take my seat here and finish up, that I outlined what I consider my, quote, lessons learned over the years. And I won't spend any time with these because many of these are pretty straightforward, but they also require a bit more of discussion and development that we don't have the time for. But I say that inclusion is far more difficult to achieve than asserting rhetorical aspirations. In other words, it's easy for folks to say, you know, can we all get along? Rodney King, can we all get along notion? But what I'm suggesting is that, yeah, it's okay to say that, but it takes work to do that. That achieving diversity takes work. It does not automatically happen by osmosis or any other kind of way. That you do the work of diversity. I say that awareness does not necessarily change behavior, and I fundamentally believe this. Just because you're aware doesn't necessarily mean that somebody acts or do something different. And we are aware of a lot of stuff if you think about it, but does that compel us to be different or act different? Not necessarily. That you can care if you don't have, you cannot care if you don't have knowledge. You cannot act if you don't care. That knowing, caring, and acting are bound together. And then finally, I simply say that this notion of incrementalism may be more functional than idealized. In other words, one of the things that it seems like that our society is largely embraces, that rather than making significant transformations, we do trickles of incremental change. It drives me straight up the wall, especially when you're talking about imbalances and inequities. But our society is, and some societies are a bit more progressive, but sometimes we tend to be, that we trickle progression when we actually should be transforming progression, if that makes sense at all. I think then what's important here is the notion that reverence really takes on many forms. And so when I teach for humanity, I'm not trying to produce some world diplomat, as I've said before, but I'm just trying to produce good teachers. Finally, I just want to say that I'm reminded of this story of Proteus. And Proteus is one of these ancient Greek sea divinities, the herdsman of seals. Proteus could be elusive by changing his form at will into such appearances as a lion, as a serpent, as a boar, as water, as a tall tree, and on and on and on. That he was very, very elusive. However, when those who caught him succeeded in holding him fast, Proteus then assumed his proper shape of an old man and told the truth. And I think that as we take that Greek metaphor, that we have to reflect on ourselves and reflect on our society and ask ourselves, when do we evolve to the place where we tell the truth? That Kahlil Gibran says in The Prophet, he says that your children are not your children. That they are the sons and the daughters of life longing for itself, and they come through you, but not from you. And though they are with you, yet they belong not to you. So it is, we connect with one another, move in and out of one another's lives, teach and heal and affirm one another across space and time. All of us wanderers, explorers, adventurers, stragglers, ramblers, sometimes tramps, vagabonds, even fugitives, but now and then pilgrims and as children. As parents, as old ones about to take that final step, to enter that territory whose character none of us here ever knows. Yet how young we are when we start wondering about it all, the nature of the journey of that final destination. That this narrative was reflected by Robert Hose in his book entitled The Spiritual Life of Children. Well, I think that's about all I have to say. And so I appreciate your time, and that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.